Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of season 2 of In Conversation With. I'm T.G. Campbell, author of the Longlisted CWA crime fiction series, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be welcomed today one of my authors who I call my Shut Up and Take My Money authors. And would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Julie Anderson. Thank you for having me, and thank you for that extremely wonderful compliment. I write crime fiction, particularly historical crime fiction, set in South London in the period immediately post World War II, and I happen to live in South London too.
So your Clapham Trilogy, as you say, set after Second World War. So that has The Midnight Man as the first book and Death in the Afternoon as the second book. And Festival Days, which is the third book coming out in April, which is now available for pre-order. So Midnight Man was one of my top 5 reads of 2025, and I've just literally finished Death in the Afternoon last night. It's absolutely brilliant. Love the book, love the characters, love the setting. But there's obviously both books are very well researched, get really good sense of place. So how do you approach that sort of process of researching for the book? Is there particular sources that you always go back to time and time again? Do you do the plot first and then do the research, or is it vice versa? So how do you sort of approach that side of the things?
Well, I love researching the books. I mean, it's an enormous sort of quagmire. You could sink in research forever and never write. But normally, before I start, I've got a sort of theme in mind.
Okay.
And in this case, a period.
Yeah.
So I started by reading around the subject, and I've got some of the books here that I used.
Yeah.
This one, for example, which is The Wonderful British Society Since 1945 by Arthur Marwick, which is essentially about all the attitudes, the societal attitudes towards things like marriage, sex, employment, law. I mean, for example, there's a chapter 4, Half Home in the Street Corner, it's called.
Yeah.
And it tells me that, for example, let's have a look. In 1947, divorces reached a peak of 60,000 in that year, 10 times the pre-war figure. Now, it then goes on to speculate on why this might be. But, it's full of really, really juicy statistics. And then it sort of analyses what that might mean. So that was amazing.
But they haven't got a 19th century version, have they, in that series?
I don't know. Oh. He uses a lot of survey material.
Oh, okay. So the census and like
the census, but also things like the labour force survey equivalent.
Yeah.
A lot of the newspapers would carry out surveys. Into what people thought about, marriage or sort of thing.
It's just literally brought it all together into one place.
Which is tremendous. The other book I used a lot. This is
you're giving all your trade secrets now. You know that.
Is this one, which is called The Five Giants, and it's by Nicholas Timmins, and it's a biography of the welfare state. The giants were identified in the Beveridge Report.
Okay.
And these giants were want, disease, ignorance, squalor, and idleness. And essentially, the Attlee government, which based its introduction of the welfare state on the Beveridge Report, tried to tackle each of them. So things like the giant disease was tackled by the introduction of the National Health Service. And the giant idleness was tackled by an attempt to get full employment. The giant squalor was tackled by the building of lots of public housing, and so on. And I mean, this was a long read, as you can see.
Don't drop that.
It was good. And thirdly, the one I used was this one, which is Post-War Britain: A Political History.
Oh yeah.
And that's by Alan Sked and Chris Cook, and that really looks at the politics, the Westminster, if you like, politics of it all. So I start by reading these things, and I suppose it's a policy of total immersion, really. I just get to understand the period completely, or as completely as one can, when one's simply, researching for a book, as opposed to, in some instances, that people like Arthur Marwick and Nicholas Timmins have spent a lifetime, studying this period. So They would know it far better. And that's sort of the first step. Yeah, there's an immersion. And it's Clapham, and I live in Clapham. I've lived in Clapham for over 30 years, so I know quite a lot about Clapham. I
You
hope
can definitely tell that you're familiar with the area when you're reading the books, which I think is really good because sometimes people set books in places they've never been to, and you can tell it's a bit like just brushed over the detail, but you definitely feel like you're walking through Clapham when you describe it and everything. So,
oh, good. Well, good.
yeah.
It worked then.
And with the research, you get the feeling that it's everything's that framework of the research you've done, but it's not info dumping. It's not like just bombarding you with facts. It's just you feel like the plot is just naturally developing and evolving within that sort of framework they've already set out with the research, which is the best way to do it. So
yeah. Oh well, good. I'm glad you think that. I mean, and I think that's it. I mean, I do all that research and I have all that knowledge, but all that does is allow me to create the world in which the characters inhabit in the story.
It gives you that sort of roadmap, sort of the pointers and what not to include, really, isn't it? Yeah, it's more, what not to include, yeah.
So it's sort of general. I mean, you must know this from writing the Bow Street stories. You don't want to do the big info dump.
No.
It's just very boring. But you want to have sufficient command of that period and an understanding of what's going on then to be able to write without stopping to think all the time. And I mean, for me, it was also, setting the books around the South London Hospital, for example, was so good because it literally is, up the road there. And the building's still there, although it's changed its use. It's now apartments above a large Tesco's where I do my shopping. And so I found out a lot about the South London, including meeting with some of the descendants of the original founders, which was tremendous, actually. Because this hospital was founded in sort of 1912 by two pioneering women surgeons, and I can talk more about them if you'd like, but believe me, I could bore for booking about South London Hospital.
I do like the fact that in the first book it's sort of like pre-NHS. I love that sort of you see how it was, and then obviously in the second book NHS is just starting to come in, so you can see again how even the locations are evolving, even just such a short period of time.
Yeah, and that was great. And I was fortunate enough in that Lambeth Archives, when I went to try and find out more about the hospital, actually had the original plans.
I love a good plan.
A good plan is an amazing thing. But what that meant was when I was writing and I was, sending my characters, I don't know, from the street into the foyer, I know exactly what they'd see in front of them.
Love that,
and that if you turned left, you went down the admin corridor. If you turned right, you went down the X-ray corridor, and all that sort of thing. It was just there. So that was just tremendous.
I just find myself thinking that I would want to work at the SLH. I think that would be my ideal place to work, I think.
Well, I think a lot of women thought so.
Yeah.
It's interesting that, there was a huge shortage of nurses after the war ended. Because I read a lot of the minutes of the management board meeting of the SLH, but I thought I ought to read some of other hospital trusts at the time so I could do a comparison.
Yeah.
And every one of them were complaining about how difficult it was to get hold of nurses, but not at the SLH because nurses wanted to work there.
Yeah.
It was run by women for women, and that was the absolute standout really for me that made the SLH so different from everywhere else. And I was fortunate enough too to come across a lady called Dr. Juliette Boyd, who was a surgeon anaesthetist at the SLH before it closed. Now, not in the period I'm writing about. No. But she was a sort of unofficial archivist of the place.
Yeah.
So I went round to see her at her home in Wimbledon, and she sort of said, "Oh yeah, my husband's just been up in the loft to get my boxes down," and there they were on her dining room table. 3 enormous boxes full of old photographs, old documents. It was just wonderful.
You're like, let me at them.
It was tremendous. It really was. So that was incredibly fortunate, really. I was very fortunate. More, I think, than doing the research on the police, though more books.
Yes, yes. Oh, you can never have too many books.
No, but I mean, I had to read around because, as you know, with Death in the Afternoon, we
Yes,
move on to the police force. So
yes.
I had Underworld, the
Oh,
Duncan
oh yeah,
Campbell,
yeah,
which is a tremendous sort of general book about the London underworld at that time,
yeah.
and things like gangland bosses.
Mm.
Oh, the lives of Jack Spot and Billy Hill, rather more sort of scandalous than
Yeah.
Underworld, which is more of a
But I
sort
think the
of
good thing on your books, though, it doesn't matter what the setting is, the people feel just ordinary people. Just ordinary people just trying to get on, just trying to sort of, do their own, do the best they can, live, do their careers and live their own lives the best they can. And so you have all these ganglands this out there sort of thing. But then in the police station, you do get to know the people and you really sort of, get to know their lives and their own little quirks as well. So, and with Faye as well, like when she starts the piece, I could really put myself in her shoes. But that's like how I would want to be. Like I want to make a good impression, and but at the same time, you're very aware that it was unprecedented, really, for like a female detective. And the same way, like I think it's very difficult, sort of, for modern audiences to really sort of fully grasp how unusual the SLH was in its day as well. The fact that it was women by women, more for women. Because you take it almost for granted to a certain extent now that we get women doctors and that sort of thing as well now, but obviously back then it was more uncommon.
yes. Yeah, well, I mean, Eleanor, who was one of the founders of the SLH, became the first female member of the Royal College of Surgeons.
Yeah.
Maud never joined, and Maud was the more difficult of the two, I think. The very, very, very tough lady, and she never joined the Royal College of Surgeons, even though Eleanor did. So she could have done because they had started admitting members. But I always get the feeling with Maud that she's a bit sort of Groucho Marx. She'd never want to belong to a club that would let her in, type thing.
Yeah.
But I mean that's how I sort of go about it in terms of doing the research. I mean it's actually great fun doing all that. I mean, I'm sure you know yourself. I mean, it's finding out
rabbit holes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's finding out stuff. So it's interesting in itself. And I suppose once I've done all that reading, then it's a case of creating the world. What that does is help me create the world.
Yeah.
And then things happen. As you say, they're ordinary people carrying on ordinary lives, albeit fictitious ones.
Yeah.
And the plot follows on from that. So
do you find that, do you sort of do the research and you find when you sort of get your sort of, I don't know if you plan your plots or not, but if you did you have your plot all planned out and then you then realize you've actually got to do another bit of research or a bit of research that you then find or found that's contradicted something you want to do in your plot, or have you had to change the plot in order to actually accommodate research?
Sometimes I guess I think what happens with me is, I mean, the plot sort of starts to shape. I'm one of those people who does plan, but only to an extent. So I know where I want to get to at the end, where I start, and I know that there'll be certain sort of markers along the way.
Yeah,
I don't know the detail of it.
Yeah.
And if I've done the research properly, then I would, when I was writing, I would not try and include things that wouldn't fit, if you know what I mean. But sometimes I'll come across some element of society that I've not read about, and I will have to go and look it up and find out, whether Faye could do this or Ellie could read that, I mean, some things you can get away with because, I mean, essentially I'm making it up.
Yeah. There's a certain line there where you sort of artistic license can take over. Yeah.
I mean, so you can do that, but I like to make it as accurate as I can.
Yeah.
Especially with something like a real place like the SLH, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah.
And people don't know about it, and I think people should. And so I needed to get that right, and that's where Juliet was great, because she read the manuscripts before they turned into books.
Yeah.
Because I was very careful to make my SLH as close to the real SLH in sort of ethos.
Yes.
As possible. And she said that she actually said she recognised the SLH in the books, which was tremendous. I also belonged to a Facebook group called, what was it, South London Hospital for Women Occupation Group, 1984-5. And this was a group of people, nurses and other staff who occupied the hospital when it was closed to keep it open.
Okay, yeah.
So when it was closed in 84, you had this huge number of women who just took it over and occupied it, including nurses who continued to offer nursing services. I mean, there was a baby born there,
Yeah.
there was all sorts of things went on. And in theory, when the hospital was closed,
Yeah.
and this Facebook group was set up years later for people who'd taken part in the occupation to reminisce and get together. So I am now an honorary member of that
I bet
Facebook
it's a treasure
group.
trove of anecdotes and stuff that you could maybe,
Yeah,
oh, sure, borrow that. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, much too late for me in some ways, but actually, it really dovetailed with all the knowledge I had from Juliet,
Yeah.
and from earlier. There does seem to have been this ongoing tradition of how the SLH worked, and it was a bit radical and it was a bit
Yeah.
different, and there weren't so many egos involved.
No.
Because women tend not to have that sort of alpha male attitude, or at least many women.
Yeah. Yeah.
Indeed, I'd say most women don't have that attitude.
Yeah.
Some do, but most don't. And so it was nice finding that sort of carried on, that sort of ethos, and it was also good having those people as touchstones, to go and talk to when I did want to find out something, halfway
Yeah.
through. Oh, is this going to work, or is that going to work, or whatever? And I had a hospital pharmacist who I know who was helping me. She's retired now, but she was helping me. She read the manuscript to make sure that I didn't completely screw up the way that hospitals manage drugs, for
Yeah, because
example.
there's a lot of things you can just make assumptions on, and you think, oh, we must logically be that way, but actually, the research tells you no, it's to be completely different, and that's where that is invaluable. And having those
Yeah,
contacts and just knowing that you can never know everything, and it's just part, like I say, part of the writing process is that joy of research and the setting and the
yeah,
things that go into
absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
So you're talking about sort of ethos of the hospital and everything. Moving on from that, so there's a school of thought that people who write books in a historical setting shouldn't really project modern attitudes and thoughts and ideas onto sort of the characters in that sort of historical setting. But at the same time, you've still got that fine line and that balance of being able to still keep your modern reader engaged. So how do you tackle that sort of balancing act of keeping it accurate to the setting and the period, but at the same time not alienating your readers?
Mm. I think. Oh, it's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of this book, the books are about prejudices of various kinds. So
Mm.
against women, obviously, because
Yeah.
one of the themes is around women in a changing society, and also against black people, because I mean, 1948, the Windrush arrives,
Yeah.
and suddenly we have a lot of black people in Clapham and Brixton.
Mm.
So one was never going to be able to avoid the portrayal of prejudice,
Yeah.
because it was there, it was real, and it happened. And I feel quite strongly about not airbrushing things out
Yeah.
of history, because I mean we'll never learn from it if we pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So I wanted that to feature, and I also wanted, I guess, for the opposite to feature, because there've always in history been people who wouldn't go along with the racist or
Yeah.
the misogynistic line, and that's especially important here, I think, in Clapham, because the history of Clapham is a very radical one. I mean, going back to the sort of 18th century, you have the censor of the press who called Clapham a Whig warren, Whig
Yeah.
being the sort of
Yeah.
anti-government people at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of
And not
course,
people with hair pieces.
well, yeah, absolutely. Everybody wore those at that time.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But also, I mean, there's a huge history of abolitionism in
Mm.
Clapham, with the Clapham sect and anti-slavery and so on. So I don't think one should be unnuanced when you look back at history. I mean, because yes, of course, there was horrible prejudice both against women and black people, but there were also lots of people who stood against that.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of how it's been in history across, well, the centuries, really. And I think as long as I mean, you do have to take modern sensibilities into account. I think
Yes.
you can't not do that. But I think if you make the prejudice part of the world of the book
Yeah.
and the reactions of the characters natural,
Yeah.
then you are showing it rather than talking about it.
Yes.
And it's talking about it that gets very sort of preachy and
Yeah. Yeah.
and unwanted. I mean, there were some elements I chose not to use in terms of the language that
Yeah.
we used.
Yes.
So, for example, and I think I actually say in the afterword in The Midnight Man, I mean, it was commonly referred to, or disabled people, especially ones with ambulatory problems, were commonly referred to as cripples.
Yes.
Now, one wouldn't use that word
No.
these days.
No.
And if you were disabled, it would be extremely offensive.
Yeah.
But it was in common usage at the time.
Yeah.
So and actually, given that this is a hospital,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what they would have said.
Yeah.
I was careful to not use certain words in relation to the racism.
Yeah.
People who were shouting slogans were described, but the slogans weren't actually quoted in the book.
Because I think most people could guess what those would be, and you don't want to give a platform to those either if somebody's not heard that before. So you don't. So it's that, yeah. But what I really liked actually was in the second book, Ellie makes a comment of they talk about fascists marching in London, and she makes a comment of, "I thought we'd left it all behind us with the war." And I suppose to a certain extent, as a modern reader, you do naively think, oh, well, just one Second World War, they beat the Nazis, everybody would be lovely, love each other, welcoming. You'd think, oh, well, you just, been through that horrible time. But like you say, it's prejudice is still there. Prejudice is people are still like racist against Jews, against blacks and everything. And you think, but you've just had this horrible, experience with the war and the Nazis and the concentration camps and everything. But so it's almost like she's almost still saying what we're thinking as the reader, but it also just turns it on its head a little bit from a modern reader point of view in terms of your own assumptions and attitudes of that period after the war. So that I thought that was really clever to sort of have that statement in that book.
Yeah. Oh, well, good. Well, I'm glad you liked it. I mean, I just really hoping that the world of the book that I create is sufficiently reflective of the world as it was.
Yeah.
And that would include all of those sort of elements. Because I mean, there was a lot of anti-Semitic feeling in this country in the late 40s and early 50s because of what was happening in Palestine.
Yeah.
There were British soldiers who were getting killed, and there were riots in some of the cities.
Yeah.
Anti-Jewish anti-Semitic riots.
Yeah.
Well, but specifically, I suppose I ought to say anti-Zionist riots.
Yes. Yeah.
The people organising those were playing on old prejudices and old.
So you could argue that's what's always the way, isn't it? Even now, people are still using the same old arguments as they used then against immigration and everything. And when you start actually drilling down into it, thinking this is the same thing that was being used as propaganda like back then. So it's just framed in a different context, but it's still essentially the same points being made. Which
it never goes away.
No, but then it shows that then shows how narrow-minded then it is, isn't it? The fact that that's still the same point, the same arguments being just recycled over and over again. So
yeah, it is. It's just for a different generation, and it's. I mean, and that's another reason why I think people who are writing about it, even in something like crime fiction, need to get it right, so that because otherwise people won't know, people will forget.
Yeah, and I think in crime fiction as well, you have a bit more freedom to be able to explore different things because obviously those sort of things fuel crime and murder and that sort of thing as well. So you can legitimately explore those in that framework.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so moving on from that, you're going to be doing us a reading from The Midnight Man.
I'm going to read you the very start, which is the prologue. which, if you like, kicks off the whole thing, the whole trilogy. It takes place actually before the story starts.
Yes, it's very, very good opening. So yeah, get your cup of tea and enjoy.
Okay, thank you. Shall I just begin?
Yes, yep.
Okay. The blackness was complete. She closed her eyes, then opened them again. It made no difference. There was no light at all, no paler black, no grey, no moon or starlight encroaching on the dark, nothing. As she clenched her fists to halt the rising wave of panic, her nails dug into her palms. That hurt. So she was still alive. But where was she? Inside, it wasn't cold, and somewhere completely without light, a total blackout. She felt rough fabric beneath her hands. She was lying on it. Tentative, afraid of what her fingers might find, she explored each side of her. Her left hand hit an obstruction, a wall. Not rough brick, but smooth and cold. Stone? Her right hand came to the edge of what she realised must be a bed, a camp bed, a thin mattress lying on a metal frame supported by springs. She raised her right arm and, feeling nothing above her, sat up. Too quickly. Her head thudded and bile rose into her throat. For a second she thought she would collapse, but she took deep breaths and waited for the pain to recede. What was going on? Had she been knocked out? Her seeking fingers could find no head wound. She couldn't remember what had happened. She swung her feet around and over the edge of the bed. They scuffed the ground. The bed was a low one. Manoeuvring onto all fours on the floor, she swept her hand in an arc around her. The surface was dry and dusty, probably concrete. There was a staleness to the air, too. Wherever she was, it had been closed up for a long time. Slowly, she began to crawl forwards, her hands feeling the way. She tried to recall the series of events before she got here. She remembered finishing work and leaving the hospital, but she didn't go to her lodgings, she was sure. So where did she go, and why? She had a vague memory of a train, then nothing. She had no idea how she'd got into this place. What was that? She paused. A noise in the distance. Traffic? No, it was a continuous sound, a growling, rumbling, growing louder, coming closer. Then it ceased. She held her breath and waited for the noise to begin again, but all was silent. Machinery? Maybe. She continued onwards. Ow! She recoiled. She'd hit her head, smacked up against something flat. Her fingers touched a metal thing with a slit down its centre. Laying her palms flat against it, she stood. There were handles. It was a cupboard. There was another to the left of it and one to the right, a row of cupboards. She could be in a storeroom. A flash of memory. She was crossing Balham Hill towards the Odeon Cinema. Terror by Night was the week's film, and it had a train on the poster. That was why the train was in her mind. But she couldn't remember seeing the film. There was nothing to the left of the final cupboard, only more wall, but a pole. No, a broom handle. This was a storeroom. Grasping the handle, she waved it out to her right. It hit an obstruction and she reached out. It was a wall like the other. When she waved it left, there was nothing there. So, the place she was in was long and narrow. She banged the tip of the broom on the floor, listening. The concrete absorbed the sound, but she thought there was a suggestion of an echo. Using the broom held out like a blind man's cane, tapping it on the floor, she walked forward a few steps, then some more, slowly waving her left arm, hand extended, cautious. She kept feeling for the wall to the right of her with the broom, making sure it was there. How had she got here? What had happened after she crossed Balham Hill? Her brain wouldn't work. She couldn't remember. The wall stopped, and so did she. She prodded the air with the broom where the wall should be. She had reached a corner. Her hand found the angle of the wall. It was metal, not stone. What was this place? There was more of an echo here, she thought, and the faint suggestion of movement in the air. No, more than a suggestion. There was a cooling on her skin. She waited, but the air was still again. Had a window been opened somewhere nearby, then closed, or a door? Encouraged by the thought of finding it, she walked onward in the direction of the tiny gasp of air, keeping the wall to her right. The floor was even beneath the broom. She was sweeping it from side to side and moving it less carefully. She'd been going to see that film, Terror by Night. That was it. But she couldn't remember any more. What was that? Was it a small speck of light in the distance? For a few heartbeats, she didn't really believe it existed, that it was her eyes playing tricks, seeing something that wasn't there. She blinked, screwing up her eyes. It wavered, but it didn't disappear. Hello? Her voice echoed, but dully, absorbed by the darkness. Hello, I'm here. The light moved. Could it be someone carrying a lantern? She hurried forward. The light was coming towards her. She could see a yellowish tinge to it, and a moving pool of grey light preceded it on the floor. It was a torch. She drew breath to shout again, but stopped. She backed against the wall and began, moving as silently as possible, to retrace her steps. Suddenly it had all come back to her. She remembered.
Oh, so many questions. I've got to read the book to find out.
Well, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so that's available. Midnight Man's available on Amazon and usual book places, bookstores.
It is, and in fact, Hobeck Books, who publish it, I think do a deal where you don't pay postage and packing if you buy it direct from them. So, if people want to buy it, I suggest they go to Hobeck Books' site, unless you're a Prime member or something and you don't pay for delivery on Amazon. But.
Yeah. So I read it on ebook, but that's what I prefer to do. But yeah. So if you want to do it, no postage package and Hobeck Books, cool.
Yeah.
So moving on from that, so we spoke about sort of research and how you sort of approach that, and saying that Death in the Afternoon sort of explores post-war London specifically through the lens of the police. As we mentioned, like Faye joining the police. So why did you decide to move Faye from? Because she starts out as at the SLH, doesn't she? Why did you decide to move her from there into the Metropolitan Police for the second book?
Well, I think it was sort of the logic of the first book that led her to move on.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, Faye is a whistleblower.
Yeah.
And, she was proved right.
Yeah.
So it would have been quite difficult for her to continue to work at the SLH, especially for the same boss.
Yes.
Who she had exposed as failing. So that would have been quite hard for her. And I think if I did have a stay on, the book would be a very different book. It would be about the relationship between her and Miss Barnett. And I didn't want to do that, especially given that I'd got Ellie and Beryl, of course.
Oh, Beryl, yeah.
Who were characters who would allow me to continue with the SLH. I wouldn't lose that. I could still use that. But I thought it was more logical for Faye to leave, because that's what whistleblowers do in almost all instances. Even if they're vindicated, eventually they don't last long at their previous employment, because they're always seen as the person who went outside and spilled the beans about the
grass to the brass.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the likelihood was that she would leave anyway. And also the London underworld of the time was just fascinating. So I thought I'd like to explore that too. And I mean, the Metropolitan Police did go on a huge recruitment drive after the war, because they had lost so many people to the fighting. I mean, who had died or injured or didn't want to come back as a police person.
Yeah.
So they did go on a huge recruitment drive, including for women.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that would be an interesting thing to explore. It's a nice thing to go from one to the other. As I think John, Faye's brother, says in the book, that Faye has gone from an almost 100%, an environment that was 100% women,
yes,
an environment that's almost 100% men.
Yes,
and
180 degrees,
one to the other, I thought would be a really interesting thing to explore. So I thought, I mean, I had to muck around with it a little bit, because I mean, ordinarily you wouldn't get a recruit like that becoming. I mean, yes, she'd go through training, she'd become a constable, a police constable, but she wouldn't ordinarily go straight into the detective branch
No.
of the police. So I had to sort of do a bit of sleight of hand there, because of course it's Commander or rather Chief Superintendent Morgan
Yes.
who persuades her to join in the first place, saying that he'd have her on his team. So of course, when she does qualify as a police constable, she's seconded straight away to the detective arm, which would not have happened. But that also places her in a very unusual position, because there were women detectives at the time, but they were
Yeah.
very, very few and far between.
But then also for having that way in, it then obviously then enabled you to highlight those misogynist sort of actions as well, because they were like, oh, she's his fancy woman, and she basically, that's how she got in. Basically, she called, did a few favors for him, shall we say, and that's how she basically got. So again, it's that not seeing her merit, just seeing her gender, and yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that that's how people would have reacted,
Yes.
How, what's she doing here? She couldn't possibly actually be adding anything because she was good at what she did. She's there because she's somebody's floozy, basically.
Yeah. But I do sort of feel at the beginning of the book that Faye's almost sort of has found her calling in the detective work, and I feel like Ellie still feels more of a natural fit at the hospital.
Yeah.
You do, so even if Faye does go through the rigor with her new job, you do still feel like she's found her natural calling. So you do feel that it's just like a natural progression for her.
Yes, I think so. I hope that readers would see that was in Faye's character from the beginning.
Yeah.
Even when she was at the SLH, she wanted to solve problems. She wanted solutions, and
I think she gets to the point where she's got as far as she can really, I think, at SLH in terms of what she wants to achieve. Then I think she's a bit stagnating a little bit because she's got it all pinned down, and she knows what she's to do and how to manage things and everything. I think she just wants a bit more.
Yeah. I think so. So it made logical sense to have her join the police, and it allowed me to talk about Gangland London and all that side of things, which is another mirror through which to see the impact of the war, really.
Yes.
Because rationing continued for so long, which allowed the black market to thrive, which is classic organised crime territory. And things like the nationalisation of certain industries, like, Faye's dad works on the railway. He's an engineer, and he complains about, stores going missing, and that's organised theft. And again, you've got this transition between private sector to public sector. A period where, organised crime sort of step in and essentially use any lack of oversight for their own benefit. So that was a way, I think, of showing how organised crime exploited the circumstances of the time.
Yeah. So before you became a crime fiction writer, you were a senior civil servant working across a number of different departments and agencies, including the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister. But my question is, has any of the experience you had working within those departments informed your writing? Were there any characters in the Clapham Trilogy which were sort of loosely based on anybody you knew during that time, or anybody else that you've encountered during your previous career?
Has it influenced my writing? Yes.
Yeah.
Of course it has, because all these things come through me, so all my own experience will inform them. And I think as well, the sort of the political and legislative stuff that finds its way into my books are there because that's what I used to do for a living.
Yeah.
I did, as you probably will know. I wrote a trio of books called the Whitehall Trilogy. League, Oracle and Opera, which were all set in Whitehall. And they were more directly drawn from my experience as a civil servant. As regards individuals, for me anyway, it doesn't sort of work that way. I will take traits from people.
Like a pick a mix of people. Sort of,
Exactly. So I don't say, I'm going to base this character on this person or that person. It's more being observant of people and seeing how they function, and then taking bits from different ones to create the characters, really.
Yeah, don't be too recognisable as people that you know, do you? Really, because you're like, oh, that person sounds familiar.
Well, absolutely, but also, I mean, there's things like people who read the Whitehall trilogy. There is a new prime minister in those books called David Hurst.
Yeah.
Have you read those?
Not yet. No.
No. Well, there's a new prime minister in them called David Hurst, and he looks surprisingly, or behaves surprisingly, like John Prescott, who was the deputy prime minister when I was in the office of the prime minister. So there are bits of
We kind of get away with that though, because he's a bit more of a prominent figure, though, isn't he? Really, so you can sort of say he's fair game to a certain extent, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, not like a private person, as it were.
Yeah.
But and also David Hurst is a very sympathetic character, but he has his own foibles, and
Yes.
those foibles you would recognise, I think, if you knew John Prescott. So.
Do you think that you inadvertently or consciously or unconsciously put a little bit of yourself into your characters? I know that I do my writing, even if it's intentional or not, you inevitably put a little bit of yourself into each of your characters. Do you find that with your work?
I think so. I mean, it can't not be part of me, if you like.
Yeah.
It comes out of my head.
Yeah.
So it bits of me will be in there, I'm sure. It was difficult with the Whitehall books because people who knew me automatically assumed that the heroine of those books, who's called Cassandra,
would be you,
was me,
yeah,
and she wasn't.
Yeah.
And she was no more me than Faye or Ellie or Beryl, on me, or indeed any of the villains. It's just that they come through me in order to get out. It's a very good way of putting it. But.
Yeah. Do you find I find as well especially when you write a series, that the characters get to the point where they just feel like real people, and then you instinctively know what they would and wouldn't do and what they would and wouldn't say? Do you find that?
Yeah, very, very much. Yes, I think people will sort of say, well, why didn't she do whatever it was? And you say, because, well, Faye wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't. It's a cheap trick, really, because I mean, who knows them better than me?
Yeah.
And likewise, you with your characters, nobody can tell you, oh yes, she would. No, she wouldn't. I know because I created her.
Because I think it's just important to know what they wouldn't do as what they would do.
I think that's right. Yes. Yeah. You can see certain circumstances where Faye or anybody, any character. Any person might behave out of character. They will do something against their own character.
Circumstances basically conspire against them. They have to do a certain thing, or because that's the only choice they've got. Yeah, but that's different to them just suddenly doing something completely out of character, just off the cuff. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah. Yes.
So with all of these interviews, we have quizzes.
I know. I'm going to get really, really humiliated now because this is about Clapham. I know.
This is true and false quiz. There's 8 questions, but you do get bonus points if you give me the correct answer for the ones that are false. So it's a total of 11 up for grabs for this. I've tried to not do it too obscure, and so I'm hoping that you'll get these some right.
I hope so.
So question 1. Clapham began life as an Anglo-Saxon village called Clapham. True or false?
True. Clapham.
Yes. You see, not too bad. There are 4 deep underground air raid shelters in the Clapham area to this day. Sorry, is that true or false? 4.
Well, there's Clapham South, Balham Hill, which is the same entrance actually. Well, it's the same shelter, but it has 2 entrances.
Yeah.
There's Clapham North, and there's Clapham Common. So you could count that as 3 or 4. I would say, because actually Balham Hill and Clapham South are 2 entrances to the same deep shelter, that they're actually 3, not 4.
Correct.
Yeah. Wow.
It's false. Yeah. So you got 2 points there because you got both the fact it's false and the correct number. The question 3. The clock tower on the High Street was unveiled during a ceremony in 1906 after it was gifted to the parish of Clapham by the Mayor of Wandsworth, Alexander Glegg. Is that true or false?
In 1986?
1906.
1906. Oh, that's...
Yeah, sorry, that's mine.
No. I was going to say, it's definitely false if it's 1986. I think it's probably true, 1906.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. See, you're doing fine.
That was a guess.
Well, it's true. The South London Hospital for Women and Children was officially opened by Queen Mary on the 4th of July 1918. True or false?
I think that's false.
That's correct. Yeah. If for a bonus point, can you tell me the correct year?
When it was opened. They set it up. They set up the trust in 1912. They opened the very first building in 1913, and then they.
Specifically when it was opened by Queen Mary.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's later, because what was opened was the Clapham South site, and the first building for the South London was actually at Newington Butts, which was a temporary building before they moved to the Clapham South site. So I would actually say it's earlier than 1918, but it probably wasn't opened during the war. 1914.
1916.
Oh.
Well, you got the point because it's false. So yeah, he did get points point out one though. I don't know what my typing is distraction. Sorry. The founders of you should definitely get this. We've discussed them several times. The founders of the South London Hospital for Women and Children were Eleanor David Coffey and Maud Chadbury. True or false?
It's Eleanor Davis Colley and Maud Chadburn.
Yes. It's false. Yeah, so you get bonus point for that as well. Right. So question 6. Clapham is comprised of 5 main areas, which are Clapham Common, Clapham Old Town, Clapham North, Clapham South, and Abbeville Village. Is that true or false?
Abbeville Village. That's where.
Abbeville. Yes, I thought I was going to get that wrong.
No. That's where I live. Abbeville Village. Except it doesn't mention Clapham Junction.
This is based on my research, and not saying they say.
Sorry.
It's based on my research, so it might be.
Okay. Well, all of those areas do exist, and they are part of Clapham, but it's not the totality. I mean, you've also got Clapham Junction.
They're the 5 main areas. So
5 main areas.
True or false?
Clapham Common, Clapham South, Clapham North,
Clapham Old Town,
and Clapham Old Town.
Abbeville Village. Yeah.
You could say that.
Okay, I'll give that to you then. Yeah, I've got down true. So
yeah. There are others. I mean, there's an area between Clapham Common North and Battersea, which is very populous, and there's Clapham Junction, of course, which is a huge area. Yeah.
Maybe I'm paranoid about my last question now. But anyway, right. So question 7. How do you pronounce that again? Abbeville.
Abbeville
Village is often referred to as Happy Valley. True or false?
I think. Well, I live here. I've never heard it called that. There is Nappy Valley, but that's actually Northcote Road, not Abbeville. So I'd say false.
Okay, it's false.
Oh, good. Because I would be mortified if I'd lived here for 30-something years and I hadn't heard its nickname.
Okay, so last question. So this one, based on what you just said, I might have got this question wrong. So anyway, but despite its name, Clapham Junction train station is not located in Clapham, but is instead in Battersea. True or false? That's a train station, not.
Yeah, not the area. The train station is in Battersea. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. There you go. So you've got. Yes. Wait a minute.
Keeping me on tenterhooks.
Yeah, so you've got a 10 out of 11 there.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, there you go. You can hold your head up high.
I will. But I ought to get it. I've lived here for 30 years. It would have been most embarrassing if
I was born and raised in Milton Keynes, and you could ask me some things about Milton Keynes, and I'm like,
yeah, but I've also just written 3 books set here, so
True. It would have been a bit embarrassing. So last question. So back to the normal question. So this is a question which I ask everybody who comes on the series, who I always find really interesting what their answers are. So if you could pick 3 people, famous or not famous, living or dead, to have coffee with, who would you choose? Why would you choose them? And what would you talk about?
Oh, right. I thought about this. And I've decided on my 3.
Yeah.
The first one would be Charles Dickens,
Yep.
because I think he's a wonderful writer and I love his work. And I remember reading his books for the first time and being really upset when I read the last one and
Yeah.
realised there were no more, so just went back and read them all again.
Yeah.
But I think he's a wonderful writer, but also because he was one of the first writers to be commercial about his work.
Yes.
So his works were first of all serialized in the
Yeah.
magazine, and he would go on sort of massive tours, not
Yeah.
just in Britain but also in the States and other places, and do readings. And he was famous for his Christmas time reading of A Christmas Carol, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
He'd fill theatres and stuff.
Yeah.
And what I would talk about, I think, would be about that, not just about his work, though. I mean, it's phenomenally interesting, but also about this split between the commercial and the literary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, I mean, there's huge snobism today
Yes.
about commercial fiction.
Yeah.
So you can write literary things. You can be Ian McEwan, or you can be, Martin
Literature,
A.
capital L. Yeah.
Yeah, literature with a capital L.
Yeah.
Or you can write commercial fiction, and that
Yeah.
will be crime, romance, etc., fantasy, the lot.
Mm.
And there's this huge snobbery. I think it's beginning to be broken down now, against commercial fiction.
Yeah.
I always think that Dickens is a sort of perfect antidote to that, because he was so commercial
Yeah.
during his lifetime, and yet he's on every school syllabus, as
I know. Yeah.
capital L. So I think he and his work are terrifically interesting for that reason, and I'd want to talk to him all about that.
Yeah.
So that's my first one.
Yeah.
My second one would be Maud Chadbourne, who's one of the founders of the SLH.
Yeah.
I would hope to see if I could get Eleanor thrown in for the coffee as well, but
Yeah, I've had a duo on here before, so I'll allow a duo for one guest. That's fine. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
But Maud specifically, because she was this really quite difficult, quirky person, I think. I get the sense of her from. I mean, obviously there's a public-facing Maud.
Yes.
But there's also because I met her adopted grandson, the son of the person she adopted, and great granddaughter. These people can remember her.
Yes.
I mean, and Antonia, her great granddaughter by adoption, is currently working for the Royal College of Nursing, as it happens. And she contacted me and asked me if I'd like to be part of their a couple of years when the book came out, when the Midnight Man came out, be part of the Royal College's summer programme of events, talking about the SLH and so on.
Yeah.
But talking to Antonia herself, and Antonia's father can remember Maud.
Yeah.
He used to call her Auntie Mary.
Yeah.
And so one gets sort of closer and closer to within touching her without,
the human side of her, and actually,
human side of her.
Yeah.
And she just seems to be such, I mean, incredibly tough, amazing.
Yes, you'd have to be, I'd imagine, though, to do what she did. Yeah.
Well, I mean, when she said that she wanted to become a doctor, her father, who was a Congregationalist minister, actually stood up in his pulpit to denounce her and said that he would rather his daughter were dead than she became a doctor.
Yeah.
Now, they did reconcile later in life, but I mean, that must have been
not a pleasant experience to go through, though, is it? If you do reconcile later in life, do you know what I mean? It's if you're denounced by your father.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But she went ahead anyway,
Yeah.
And
Faye.
Yeah, well, tremendous, really.
Yeah.
And she was definitely the driving force behind raising the money for the hospital.
Yeah.
Although Eleanor was much more of a clinician and working on the medical side.
Yes.
Although Maud herself was a surgeon.
Yeah.
But she also, I mean, there's a lovely story that her grandson told me about her during the general strike.
Mm.
And now by this time, Maud was not a proletarian. Maud enjoyed the fruits of her labour. She had a Rolls Royce and a chauffeur.
Yeah.
And during the general strike, she was being driven to a hospital in the East End where she used to do voluntary work, operating on people who couldn't pay, essentially. So she was going over there, and some strikers took one look at this rich woman, driving around, and chucked a brick through the window of her car.
Oh.
Maud picked it up and threw it back.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, that's the sort of Maud that
I would do.
Yeah. And I want to meet this person,
Yeah.
So, excuse me, she would be my second choice to have a coffee.
I think that'd also be interesting for them to meet Charles Dickens as well. I think that would be an interesting conversation between the three of them as well. Yeah.
But I'd like to find out what drove Maud, really.
Yeah.
And why? Because there were lots of people. Excuse me, I'm going to have a cough sweet.
That's all right.
There were lots of women nurses and so on, and increasingly women were studying to become doctors. They were still quite rare, but there weren't many of them who just decided, well, I'm going to set up my own hospital then.
Yeah.
And something drove Maud to do all this.
Yeah.
And I'd like to find out what did.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she's my second character. My third, I thought about this, and what I thought I'd like to do would be meet someone who was writing stories before really we knew what stories were. Okay. So I thought about Homer, for example, with the Iliad, the Odyssey. And then I thought, no, that's no good, because, historians now think that Homer wasn't a person, because these stories have been doing the rounds for a long time, and they were just drawn together into what became the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Yeah.
So I thought, no, that's no good. So who else should I choose? And I lit upon the playwright Aeschylus.
Okay.
Who was an Athenian.
Yeah.
And who was writing at a time when Athens was just formulating the ideas around what we now know as democracy.
Yeah.
So the rule of law rather than the rule of the strong arm.
Yeah.
Citizens who would be tried by their peers.
Yeah.
In a court of law.
Yeah.
They didn't call it that, but
that's basically more. Yeah.
And that people would have a vote in order to determine who would rule them.
Yeah.
And he wrote the Oresteia, which there are only 3. There were 8 plays originally, but there are only 3 that are performed now. And there's Agamemnon. It's a sort of post Homerian period. So Agamemnon's coming home from the war, from Troy. Having got all that, having been away for over a decade, he's coming home to his wife Clytemnestra, who does not forget that Agamemnon had caused his own daughter to be sacrificed in order to get a fair wind to go to Troy.
Yeah.
So there's retribution in the air. So that's the Agamemnon. Then there's the libation bearers, which is essentially about the brother and sister Oedipus and Electra, who are son and daughter of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, and what they do when they realise their mother has killed their father. And then thirdly, there's the Eumenides, or the kindly ones, which is about the Furies, who attend anyone who slaughters people and drive them mad.
Yeah.
They become the kindly ones, and they are tamed in the way, and it's a sort of allegory of how Athens is choosing to go down the route of law rather than of might and emotion. Law and reason versus might and emotion. And it just occurs to me, that is almost like the basis of Western culture, really.
Yeah.
So
go back to the beginning.
I'd really like to talk to him about it all, because he lived through incredible times as well. With there was the war against Sparta and the invasion of the Persians and all this sort of stuff. So I would very much like to talk to Aeschylus about all of that.
You should definitely do coffee, I think, to keep you awake while you're discussing all these things.
Yes, possibly.
That would be, yeah, this is why I love asking this question, because it's the combination of people. You just can't imagine those people together. Figure that would be a very, very interesting group chat.
Well, yeah, I mean, put them all together. That's the thing, they're so different. And I mean, and Maud would confound both the men.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know anything, nobody like her.
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying that. I mean, Aeschylus created Clytemnestra, the husband murderer.
Yeah.
The queen, the husband murderer.
Yeah.
So he can't have been that prejudiced against women in that way, because he creates really strong characters. Electra is an incredibly strong character.
Yeah.
And of course, Dickens created amazingly strong women.
Yes.
So it would be interesting not just to talk to each one of them, but to see how they talk to each other.
Yeah. Well, we've now come to the end of our chat already. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been absolutely fantastic. Do you want to just remind people where they can buy your books and what they should start off with?
They can be found on Amazon.
Yep.
They can be found on the website of Hobart Books, the publisher.
Yep.
But also in Waterstones and essentially any good bookstore. If they don't stock them, then they can get them.
Yeah. So to remind people when the third book of the Clapham Trilogy is coming out, is that the end of April, isn't it?
Yeah, where it is, Festival Days. It's quite fancy, isn't it? Yeah, isn't it? I like that cover, I really do. They've all got really great covers.
Yeah, actually. I love their covers, they're very sort of vintage looking, sort of that kind of, fitting with that era, definitely,
Yeah, well this comes out on the 28th of April and is the third in the trilogy.
Do you think you're going to revisit that universe with those characters beyond the trilogy?
Well, not immediately, because I think I need a bit of a break from 1940s or 50s stuff. But a friend of mine, a fellow writer called Chris Lloyd, who writes the wonderful Occupation series, Eddie Giral, the Paris flic in 1940, has been lambasting me to write another one, because he says he's far too invested in Faye, so he wants another one, and indeed there is one in my head. So I may come back to it at some point, but I need a bit of a break.
Yes.
Because I mean, people give you strange looks in supermarkets when you find you're using 1940s slang at the checkout.
Oh yeah.
So I need a bit of a break, I think, from it. But yes, there is another one in my head. So at some point, I may indeed come back to the South London and Faye and Ellie.
Ooh, exciting. Thank you very much.